Good evening and welcome to EWTN's coverage of the 14th Ordinary Synod of Bishops. The EWTN team here in Rome and in Birmingham will be working to bring you daily coverage of what is happening here inside the Synod Hall just behind me. Each day at this time, we will be coming to you live with our lineup of experts and members of the Synod to delve into the issues and to bring you the latest. As you know, this Synod is all about the family. In fact, for the past year, Pope Francis has made the family the Church's focus. The meeting that begins today is the fruit of a meeting that took place last year, the Extraordinary Synod last October, that also focused on the family. And it comes on the heels of the World Meeting of Families in Philadelphia, a great celebration that brought Pope Francis to the United States. The Synod meetings take place behind closed doors. This is always the case. It gives the bishops the chance to talk openly about the issues at hand. But the Vatican will be holding daily press briefings, and we will be bringing you analysis and commentary of the day's events. But now I'd like to welcome on set Edward Penton. Edward is the Vatican correspondent for the National Catholic Register and has covered everything about these meetings on the family for the past year and has been reporting on the Vatican for over a decade. Edward, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Mary.
If you don't mind, I'd like to start right from the basics because we're going to be talking about the Synod for 3 weeks. And I wonder if all of our viewers know exactly what a Synod is. Just tell us in simple terms, what is a Synod?
Well, the word synod comes from the Greek, and sin means together, and hodos means road or way. And so it's basically bringing those together to be a journey together, if you like, for the Church. So it's a consultative body for the Pope. It was restarted, if you like, by Paul VI in 1965 to try and help the bishops to become more in contact with the Holy Father and to give him more sort of communication from what's going on in dioceses around the world. Around
the world, because the Church is truly global. There are millions of Catholics around the world, each group facing different problems, as you were. And so they come together with the Holy Father, who, as we remember, is a bishop. And one of his titles is Bishop of Rome. So coming together with him, with his primacy, of course, they discuss these various issues. And this meeting is, of course, on the family. You covered last year's Extraordinary Synod on the family. There was a lot discussed there. The cardinals have had, and the bishops have had a year to discuss. There have been questionnaires sent out. And here we go, we're beginning again. How do you evaluate the beginning of this year's Synod so far? We've had events over the weekend. Today was day one, but we've had events leading up to this day, a vigil, a mass. How do you think this is getting started?
I think, generally, I think people are very positive about it. I think the Holy Father has been very much sort of restating church teaching and established church teaching, underlining doctrine, especially on the most controversial issues like marriage, divorce and remarriage in the family, and marriage between a man and a woman, for example. He's been emphasizing these both in his homily and in his homily at the opening Mass and the vigil, the prayer vigil that happened the night before.
Yeah, and I noticed that in his visit to the United States, in many of his addresses, he kept talking about the complementarity between man and woman, and he said that many times this weekend. Do you think this is a way of saying, you know, if you think that we're discussing other issues, this is actually Christian marriage and this is what we are discussing?
I think so. I think he's aware of the problems. I think he's aware of the controversies that happened last year. Viewers may remember that there was a lot of concern about these messages sort of being put out over the heads of the Synod Fathers, and messages which weren't really in line with church teaching and church doctrine. So I think there's an emphasis now on trying to re-establish that doctrine. From the word go, it seems. Yeah.
I've noticed a lot more calm this year. I think there was a lot of, like you say, misinformation, a lot of sensationalism maybe in the press, and the cardinals and the bishops were actually discussing these issues. Pope Francis, as in difference to other synods in the past, I mean, you and I have covered several synods, and they're usually a bit boring, and the Synod Fathers would say that themselves. They get up, they give their discourse, they sit down, another bishop from another area gives his speech, and there's a nice document at the end of it. Pope Francis has said, let's close the doors, and everybody feel free to talk about. And so I think this free discussion, though, led to maybe a little bit of confusion about, oh, wait, are they talking about change?
Yes, there was a bit of that, and I think there's sort of perception there was a lack of transparency last time, and they've tried to address that. Some people aren't so happy further, but it does seem to be an effort on the part of the Synod of Bishops to try and make it more accountable and more transparent.
I wanted to ask you about that. There was a press conference on Friday. As we know, Cardinal Baldisseri is in charge of the office of the Synod, so he was at the press conference this year. What are some of those changes, and what do you think they?
Well, because it's split into three parts, there's no. Usually a synod you have the sort of general discussion, and then it's made into the small groups. They go into small groups and they discuss the interim report, which is put out in the middle. The small groups do. Now this time there's a mixture of general discussion and small groups going throughout the 3 weeks. So there isn't going to be an interim report. That's a change from normal synods.
And those were chosen by the Holy Father, and all of them, I think some of them may have been elected too, and then some of them were also appointed by the Holy Father.
Yeah.
They're in charge of taking the synthesis of everything that will be discussed here over the next 3 weeks, consolidating that into a document. So they present that to Pope Francis because he is the universal pastor, the universal teacher, and then he reflects on that?
Yes. I mean, they vote on it first,
okay,
and then they change it, and then they give it to the Holy Father, and then it's up to him what he wants to do with it. And that's the thing about the Synod. It's really a consultative body for him, and it's up to him. He can issue a decree from it or whatever he wants to do. But it all rests ultimately with the Pope. It's up to him what he wants to do with all this information that's been gathered over 2 years.
Some people say there might not even be a document at the end of this synod. It might just be informative for Pope Francis.
Yeah, normally there's what's called a post-synodal apostolic exhortation.
Oh, these are all complicated words, but that is what it's called. There's a lot of interesting vocabulary over the next 3 weeks, everyone.
So that is normally what happens, but there is talk that won't be produced this time. We've just got to wait and see what the Pope decides. That may cause a lot of controversy if he doesn't produce that, because people have wanted clarity. They want this reaffirmation of church teaching after what many people see as confusion over the last 2 years. So we'll see what happens about that.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens in the work that will take place over the next 3 weeks. All of that, again, will be made into a document given to Pope Francis, who will either come out with a document or not, and then we can see this great teaching on the family. But he has dedicated the past year of the Church's life to the family. He called an extraordinary synod, and that means that he saw an extraordinary need. We've only had 3 in the history of the Church. Usually we have ordinary synods, which this one is. So the fact that he called the extraordinary one, followed it up with another ordinary synod on the family, lets you know it's weighing on his heart. He sees it as maybe the major problem facing the family right now.
Yes, I think that the general consensus is that the family is at the root of society, and if the family isn't working, I think John Paul said, if the family is not functioning, if it's not protected and so forth, then society declines. And I think that's the concern. And I think his general aim is to try and break down the barriers, if you like, to the church and to those coming to the church, and to say, look, the church has the answers to the family and to the family problems. Come to the church and listen to what we've got to preach and to teach.
You know, the man organizing this synod is Cardinal Lorenzo Baldisseri. I caught up with him after the press conference to present the synod schedule. He said he had just gotten back from Philadelphia and the World Meeting of Families, and I asked him if he thought the meeting was a good preparation for this synod.
Yes, because many of them told me that this is the prelude of the synod. It's a very good prelude. Very, very, very exciting prelude too, because I met many people, I saw many people encouraging to all of us for this synod who is starting now. I'm sure that we will be a very successful moment at the end, with a document which resume all opinions, all contribution of the Synodal Fathers, and we entrust this to the Holy Father.
We forget that Cardinal Baldisseri was in Philadelphia with Pope Francis to be there for the World Meeting of Families. And I think it was a great way for the Vatican officials that are meeting here now to prepare for their discussions, to have that great celebration of what it means to be family. But I also asked him very quickly to talk about the theme of this synod, because all we're talking about is what's going to take place, all the different terms, the meetings, the schedules. So I wanted to ask him, in his opinion, what this theme for the synod means and the importance of it.
It's very important, the vocation, because we, according to our faith as a Catholic, we intended that the family is vocation. It's not only the priest is or the vocation.
How much time do we have when we come back?
Religion, but the family itself.
So I say goodbye to Edward?
Vocation in the church and the society. This is very new, if you like, if you intend it. It is when speaking about of the disciple and the missionary, all Christian disciples. That means the family institution is also missionary. In this way, we vocation and mission at the same time to the world, in the pilgrimage of the humanity, and then like light which we present to all people in the world, faithful or unfaithful, or atheist. We are light of the world, like Christian. Then the light, and also salt of the world. In this way, we have no pretension to impose anything. We have to propose.
We're going to talk about Cardinal Erdo.
Okay. What is the beauty, the values of the family in the world.
Our thanks again to Cardinal Baldisseri. Again, he is the man appointed by Pope Francis to organize and be in charge of this synod and bring it to fruition. So again, we thank him for his time and being on our first program as we open our coverage of this very important event. Today started off with a bit of a novelty. The first 2 hours of the synod from inside the synod hall. Again, the doors are usually closed to the outside world, but they were broadcast, they were streamed over the internet. And so we were able to see the welcome of the Synod Fathers and Pope Francis address all who were there, the Synod Fathers that were in the hall. Cardinal Erdo had some very interesting comments to make, and I wanted to ask Ed, who's still here with me on the set. Ed, what did you make of Cardinal Erdo's comments today? Very interesting.
Yes, well, it was very much, as we were saying earlier, a sort of restatement of the Church's teaching, underlining, for example, the indissolubility of marriage. He referred in the press conference to the gospel reading of yesterday, which was Christ's teaching, you know, what God brings together, man must not put asunder. And so there was that...
they made a point of saying, we didn't pick these readings, they just happened to be the Sunday readings, so very, very providential there.
Exactly, yes. And in fact, I mean, one source within the Synod told me, a Synod Father, he said his talk probably changes the direction of the Synod. He thought it was that important.
Okay.
Because it was that reaffirmation, sort of setting people's minds at rest that, you know, this teaching is not up for grabs as it seemed last time. It's going to stay. The issue of same-sex unions, for example, there's been talk by some bishops, Synod Fathers in Germany, for example, who are all sort of proposing that that same-sex unions be validated by the Church, but that...
He quelched all of that, I think, with his opening remarks. One journalist said to me, well, I think the Synod's over. After Cardinal Erdo's remarks today, I think it's over. I think he said everything there needs to be said, so that's very interesting.
Yes. But also, I think the methodology is interesting because you've got these small groups which are designed, they say, to sort of make the discussion more intense and more fruitful, if you like. So that's going to be, and those are going to be published at the end of each week. So there's going to be 13.
We'll get that. We can read that even from home. So they can speak 3 minutes in the Synod Hall, but then they can speak as long as they want in these small groups. So I think that's a nice change.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you, Edward Pettin. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have the president of the U.S. Bishops Conference, Archbishop Kurtz, is going to be with us. So stay tuned. Welcome back to EWTN News' continuing coverage of the Synod on the Family. Our next guest is one of the Synod Fathers and President of the United States Bishops' Conference, Archbishop Joseph Kurtz. Your Excellency, welcome and thank you for being on the program.
Mary, so good to be with you all.
So glad to have you.
Thank
you have literally just left the Synod Hall.
Do you know what? You all work really fast. This was very good. I'm happy to be here.
We're so glad you made the trek across the piazza. We have been present, well, we got to see through streaming what happened this morning in the Synod Hall.
Good.
We followed the press briefings with Father Lombardi in the press office. But as someone who's inside the Synod Hall and one of the Synod Fathers, what do you think of how Pope Francis, through his homily at the opening of the Synod Mass and the remarks he made in the Synod Hall this morning, how do you think he's preparing you for the work ahead?
Well, I think both. Thanks for mentioning both. I think the homily and then combined with his morning observations and in a sense, conversation with us, I think really has set the tone very well. Obviously, our Holy Father talked yesterday about solitude or loneliness, about people who need to be accompanied within our church. He talked about the beauty of the union of a man and a woman.
Right.
And openness to children. And then in a very beautiful way, I think he talked about that union of church and family. And he began with that this morning. He said, our synod is very serious in that we're looking at the good of the church and we're looking at the good of family, and these intersect, which I thought was beautiful. He then said, while the work we're doing is important, we must remember we're on a journey, and every family is on a journey, and Christ calls us to accompany them.
Yes.
He mentioned 3 virtues. Maybe I can mention these to you because they touched me. One was apostolic courage. He said, we need to have an apostolic courage, which I took to mean, let's go back to the courage that was given to the apostles when Jesus said, receive the Holy Spirit.
Right,
it's
the
really
Pentecost.
the Easter Sunday night, but also Pentecost. You're absolutely right. And so there is a certain sense of not only the teaching, but the power of Jesus that needs to permeate. He said we should have evangelical humility, which means don't too quickly point the finger at someone, which I thought, that's good advice for a priest. You know, we always saw the good pastor as the one who could welcome. And then finally, and very beautifully, he talked about the fact of trusting, having a prayerful trust in the Holy Spirit. And I have to tell you, today in the Synod, I came there to enter in. You know how we talk about Mass entering into the mystery? Well, in many ways, I found myself wanting to enter in to listen to the richness of people. You know, there were delegates from different continents.
Right, and married couples there.
Married couples.
Sure.
There was those talking about persecution.
Exactly.
So beautiful things that were said.
Families
and very powerful things.
And very powerful things. How do you view the role of the Synod? Because remember, the Pope is the Bishop of Rome. He's your brother bishop. And you're coming from all over the world. The word Catholic means universal. The problems aren't always universal. I think each area of the globe has their own challenges to the family, but all over the world, the family is being challenged. So how do you view this role of the Synod and what you're doing here together with your brother bishops?
Well, you know, in fact, you reminded me of something else the Holy Father said. He said, this is not a parliament.
Exactly.
This is not a parliament. He said, and then he said very beautifully, we're in communion. And of course, we're in communion with our Holy Father together. And so I think that notion of being in communion and seeking, in a sense, the path that would be the path of Christ. Because in every age, the Church introduces to every age the person of Jesus Christ. And so in many ways, we introduce that person to Christ. I'll mention one other thing because it was part of my intervention, and that is the family as an active participant. I mean, the thing that would kill the Synod is if we started to think that the Church Fathers are somehow going to advise and have all the answers for each family. No, we have to call forth, in a sense, missionary families who themselves will help others.
Cardinal Erdo mentioned that today at his address at what we heard in the Holy See press office about the families ministering to families, creating the sense of community, because it is hard out there. A lot of families, society has sort of made us drift apart from one another, and there's not a lot of tight family bonds anymore. So to have other missionary families, I think that's a great idea.
It is. I think our Holy Father also said, I'm not sure if it was in the homily or not, he talked about how even people who are distant from the church are attracted to a credible witness. So when they see a joyful family, there's something sparks their curiosity. Gee, what does this family have? And that's what we should be calling forth as a church.
In his homily yesterday, Pope Francis said he made men and women for happiness, to share the journey with someone. Again, combating this loneliness that he mentions a lot. We were not created to be alone, and he mentioned that, with someone who complements them. This is God's dream for his beloved creation, he said, to see it fulfilled in the loving union between a man and a woman. Your Excellency, why this emphasis? And he emphasized it at least 4 times during his visit to the United States.
Do you mean the emphasis on complementarity?
Complementarity between a man and a woman.
Yeah, well, obviously, anyone who goes back to the words of Jesus, in which Jesus said, in the beginning, he goes back to the very point of creation, that the enriching of the person is so intimately bound with the equal but different gifts of a man and a woman. And I think that gift is what is at the very center and core of marriage and family. We accompany many people. I mean, you know that. And so we always have known that. But at the very core of the gift of marriage and family is that 2-in-1 flesh union, loving union, as our Holy Father said, of a husband and a wife, open to children, open to new life.
Yes, and he often speaks about the courage to take that step. And I love it when he talks to engaged couples or couples who've been dating that say a long time.
Yes.
And I love the story he tells. He's told it twice now. And when the mother says, Your Holiness, or back then he would have been Your Excellency, or, Your Eminence, my son, he's 30, he's been dating his girlfriend a long time, and he doesn't want to get married. What can I do? And he says, stop ironing his shirts.
He said that in Philadelphia?
He did. Yes,
I thought that was good.
He said it in Naples, too, because the Italian mamas are,
It's, I think for people, it's so tangible. I mean, they say, wow, that sounds like our family.
Yeah. I think young people today, do you see them reticent, hesitant to make a commitment to family? Well, he was really insistent on that.
Well, it is frightening for people, and people, especially, we're in an age, especially in the United States, in which we try to overscript our life. I mean, we have a baby being given birth, and all of a sudden we're talking about what college that child's going to go to. Right. So we do overplan. Let's face it. So our Holy Father is not saying don't plan, but he is saying be part of the adventure that Christ leads you on. And it's an adventure of love that brings you out of yourself and prepares you. It's a similar adventure that I think I tried to answer in the vocation as a priest.
Responding to the call as a vocation.
As a vocation, and as an openness to a certain adventure that brings us out of ourselves. Our Holy Father also says, don't turn in on yourself. Don't be so self-reverential.
He sees it as a real malady of society, that we have become so self-focused, and to get out of ourselves, have the courage to commit, to give your life to another person. He brought up self-gift. You as a pastor of souls, what do you see are the main problems facing the family right now, besides the one we've been hearing about over the past few years, but Christian families, just regular Christian families, moms and dads with kids?
Well, I have to say, and I've said this at the last Synod last year, I think people want to be inspired. Yeah. People want to have some sense of hope. They don't want to say, well, gee, I'm some statistic.
Right.
And there's no way I'm going to succeed. No, there are many, many issues. But I think if you had to say what is the one thing that everyone desires and thirsts for, it's a sense of hope.
Right.
It's a sense that somehow God is calling me and will accompany me in a life that, how did our Lord say, life in abundance, a life that is greater than you ever imagined, which I think is the adventure of following Christ.
What fruit, we just have about a minute left, what fruit do you hope to bring home with you to the United States from this Synod?
It's early. So give me 21 days to figure this out.
Yeah.
However, I think I do want to bring home a certain sense of listening to other people, a sense of the beauty of the teachings of Jesus, and of a desire to encourage others to inspire one another, not to lose that capacity.
Wonderful. Your Excellency, thank you so much for being with us on the program this evening. We really appreciate it. He'll be inside the Synod Hall with his brother bishops, making all of these great, difficult decisions and discussions. It'll be a time of fruitful discussion. Absolutely. And we can't wait to see the result of that. We wish you all the best and your time here in Rome. Well, that brings our coverage of day one to a close. We thank you so much for joining us. Remember that all the latest information on the Synod you can find on EWTN EWN TV or radio or the EWTN app or the latest programming information, you want to check out EWTN's website at EWTN.com. And we want to hear from you on social media. So get on Twitter, use the hashtag EWTN Synod, and we'll be back tomorrow with our continuing Synod coverage. I'm Mary Shovlin. Good night from Rome.